Boreham Wood.
Yeah,
Just a word on Boreham Wood as well. I know it's league related rather than polls related, but did anyone think they'd be second?
absolutely not.
No.
Still
To be
top
fair,
12.
I think I remember saying, and again, if people have listened and I've not said this, then feel free to correct me, but I'm pretty sure I said they'd be fine this season. Like I said, there wouldn't be any issue with relegation or anything like that because they've got a manager who's familiar with the club. He knows the league. I didn't think there'd be any issue. At no point did I think they'd be anywhere near second at this point.
No.
I thought mid-table had a push,
Thing
but
is,
the
they've
work
always,
that they've done.
barring that season when they went down, I feel like they've always been there or thereabouts.
Yeah, they had a couple of playoff runs.
Like they're one of them clubs where they've always been, for us anyways, notoriously hard to beat.
Yeah, there was that 4-0, wasn't there, at Boreham Wood? Do you remember that? Did Nicky
Yeah,
Kabamba score twice?
yeah,
I remember rightly. But other than that, I think we've really struggled at Boreham Wood and at home to Boreham Wood as well, actually. There was that one, I think Gus Mafuta scored the winner against us at the
yeah.
Vic at one point as well. So, yeah, they are one of those very sort of awkward teams to play because they'll always make it difficult, which makes it all the more strange that at the end of August, we got a draw out of that.
And I think everyone after that game thought, oh, a draw don't mean newly promoted Boreham Wood.
But you know
Looking
what?
back on it now, it is a great point.
Not only is it a great point, we went down to 10 men after, 50 minutes or something,
And they
and
didn't
we
really do
still, yeah,
much.
yeah.
Like, we didn't offer much in that game either, don't get me wrong. But for large parts of that game, I didn't feel like we were in any real bother. They had a couple of half chances here and there. But
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely Coogan who got sent off. I
yeah,
remember that. I think Cartwright had one of those games as well where he just everything was attracted to him. He saved
in
everything.
every game then. Every
Well,
game
pretty
he
much every game, yeah, but that one in particular, because we were down to 10 men, the focus was on the defense and he just saved everything. But that being said, I don't think they really tested us that much after we went to
no,
10 men. They
I
kept a
think they
lot
had a
of
lot
the
of ball.
ball. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. They kept a lot of the ball, but I don't think they actually did that much in terms of, making sure and testing them, etc. I can't remember who came on for Quorgan. Sorry, obviously they didn't come in for Quorgan because he was sent off, but I'm trying to think. Parks came on for Johnson, didn't he? I've got the
Yeah.
lineups there, just checking. Which means obviously you're losing that from up the pitch, and then Reed is isolated, and we can't really attack that much. But we just seemed so solid defensively.
Which goes back to what we were saying earlier on.
Yeah. And Nicky Featherstone was, of course, on the bench that game. Did he think he'd be an interim charge 2 months later? To be
I'm
fair,
just
given how the club have been operating, he may well have done.
I'm just wondering how long is it before we see Nicky Featherstone bring himself on to see a game out?
I'd love to see that. Imagine bringing himself on in like the 94th minute or something when we're 3-0 up. Just, fancy a run out today, lads. Do you reckon I should put myself on? Yeah, go for it, Nicky. Do you know what? I'd highly rate that move if he does it. It'd be fantastic to see. I think in the history of the National League, I think there's only two teams that have ever gone up who haven't finished either second or third. One of them being us, and the other one was last season when Oldham went up in fourth. I think
Yeah.
the rest of them have been second or third, so they've had that week off. But it was quite noticeable last season because, as you say, York got well beaten.
And they looked miles off it.
Yeah, they looked miles off it, which they hadn't done, to be fair, for a lot of the season. Obviously, they finished on 96 points or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is a point to that, and I do see the appeal of that. I just don't know. I think the concept of it is better than the execution, that playoff system, because the idea of having the home game and not having to play the extra games sounds good, but then you realise that it might come at the expense of a bit of match fitness, and it'd be interesting to see how we would deal with that. Like if we finish second or third this season and we had the home tie against a team that were clearly match fit and fresh, because we didn't have to deal with that. We obviously played Bromley in between, playing Stockport, and it would be a very interesting thing. Plus, to be fair, the thing with our playoff victory as well is that we didn't have any fans inside that stadium at Stockport.
Yeah.
Because away fans were banned, so Bromley couldn't bring anyone up to us when we, played them in the eliminator, and then we couldn't go to Stockport.
It's a really strange atmosphere, that, by the way. The Wealdstone, was it Wealdstone or Weymouth? And then the
But the
Bromley
final, the final, yeah, the final game we
games were
won
fans
4-0.
was so strange.
It was because everyone was like equidistant from each other, where and they're all
Yeah.
spaced out like evenly, and it was all like like stood stock still, legally, But it was very odd, and obviously you had the home fans in the rink end as well because there
Yeah.
were no away fans, so everyone was spread out. It was that year, that whole year was unlike anything we'll ever see again. Like I don't think it happened now. I
No.
genuinely don't think it could happen. But I mean, Bristol law.
Was brilliant.
Well, with the exception of him popping up in the 96th minute or whatever it was. I don't think I've ever felt worse at a football game than that moment
Oh yeah.
because that was about the most Hartlepool United thing that's ever happened in the history of existence.
Absolutely everyone in our stand, I think,
I think
felt like
everyone in the
exactly
country,
what was coming.
do you know what? Everyone in the country thought when he put that ball in, the Torquay were going to go up then.
Yeah.
Because it felt like the TV companies were leaning that way as well. It genuinely thought that everyone was going, they can't lose now. The keeper's just scored to keep them in the game. It is now destiny that they will go on and win it.
Yeah.
And to be fair, they had a good go as well. There was about, I think, the 10 minutes at the end of extra time. I think we were the better side
Yeah.
because I think Torquay had that like 20 minutes at the start of this at the start of extra time where they put a lot of pressure on. But I think they had a couple of injuries if I remember. Like they had a bit of like cramp and
I know
fatigue and
Lemon
such.
Havens went off, didn't he?
Uh,
So it was massive for them that season.
yeah, potentially. But I remember Danny Elliott came on, and the thing with Danny Elliott was like he wasn't particularly prolific for us, but he put a lot of effort in when he was on the pitch.
Well,
And
have you
like,
seen he's now? I think he tweeted that he's Macclesfield's top scorer now or something.
oh, potentially, yeah, he dropped.
I
Obviously, they're in the
don't know if
National League
that's
North now.
since the Phoenix club. I'm guessing
Probably,
when
yeah.
it went to them records, but
Do you know
yeah.
what? The funny thing is as well, like if you remember that season, we got Richie Bennett from Stockport, who
What
were in who were in our division at the time. So why they loaned him to us is still a mystery to me to this day. Who, funnily
what
enough, scored a hat trick against Wealdstone.
yeah,
So we'll have him back this weekend if he wants to come back. In that 7-2. And then say we loaned Danny Elliott, who was playing at Chester in the league below, which
yeah.
was another strange loan that we had. It was that we made some very strange loan signings that season. Obviously, the one that worked out the most was Luke Armstrong.
Yeah.
I think to be
Mostly
fair, it's fair to say because a lot of people seem to forget in that season that in the first half of the season before we signed Luke Armstrong,
we weren't great.
yeah, we weren't bad by any means, but we
We were
weren't
sort of
the
where we
team.
are now, weren't we?
Pretty much, yeah, we were like hovering around the periphery. We weren't exactly like
I think
world
we were ninth
beaters.
or 10th.
Yeah, probably about that. And then we signed Armstrong. He clicked with Ort, and it was history from that point onwards.
I think it was
Like
what? Did we go something stupid like 10 home games in a row, winning or something daft
it
like
was
that?
it was absolutely obscene. And the irony, or to be fair, read into it what you will, the fact that we went on that sort of run at home with no fans in the stadium, honestly. And the horrible thing about it is we will never do that again. We'll never do it again. I'd love to know if all of the fans didn't turn up for one game, if we went on to win it like 6-0 or something, and then we just went, right, no fans allowed ever again. Like we'll play, like say for example at the Truro game in 2 weeks, like if we just said, right, no fans allowed in from either side, and we went on to win it like 7-0 or something, and the club went, right, clearly this is something that works. No more fans. Honestly, like the attendance for every match is just zero.
Yeah,
Like, you've got the DJ and the thing, and the attendance for this match, zero. The attendance for this match, whoever's in the press box and whoever's in the tunnel.
yeah.
But
All
yeah,
stewards.
yeah, yeah. But I think he scored his first goals, if I remember rightly, Luke Armstrong against Kings Lynn. I think it was a midweek game, if I remember rightly. He scored a couple of goals. We won 4-0 or something like that, I think. And then, like I said, that was just the launch pad. It's a difficult one because we're in a situation of interim charge once again. I can't tell you off the top of my head. Obviously, you'll be able to say this as to what the managerial situation at Wealdstone's been like. Have you had long term management? Sort of, you're not. I'm assuming you're not a hire and fire type club. Certainly not to the
No,
extent.
we haven't got the money to do that anyway.
Mm.
So it's kind of like that's where we are. We it's been a little bit all over the shop since Stuart Maynard left to go to Notts County in January 24. That's right. Yeah, get that correct. David Noble came in from St Albans. Absolutely terrible. we were just sinking like a stone. If we kept him until the end of the season, we'd have been relegated. So we sacked him. We've got 5-6 games to go and stayed up. Matt Taylor came in last summer. I didn't rate him at all. Talk's a talk. Obviously one of those very good media managers, and players seemed to like him, but the results weren't translating onto the pitch. Performances, I don't think, were really there either. And then somehow he was mates with Stephen Ward from their days, I think, either at Portsmouth or maybe actually might be in a Burnley. And he was director of football at Solihull. So he gets a gig at Solihull last January, thank goodness. Neil Gibson comes in. He'd only been managing in Wales. He's now interim charge at Altrincham. And he kept us up and he did a really good job. And then he was let go. And that's where I said about instability of, well, what's going on here. But Sam Cox has come in. He is local, I guess, which Gibson wasn't. He knows the club. He used to play for us. And at the minute, like I say, I think, again, even now, Wealdstone fans' expectations will be still to be coming 20th, survive, just because of the way the club is run. We are still, for the time being, fan-owned, maybe taken over by Nick Samarka, this American chap. He's going to be allowed to take ownership of the club down the line. But unlike Paul's, I mean, like I say, every time I see it, it just seems like total instability off the field. I don't know if it's because of your owner, but it's been like what Darren Sarll, Lenny Lawrence, Anthony Limbrick, Simon Grayson. And that's for like the last 12 months, give or take.
It's a pretty impressive list, isn't it, really? Yeah, Darren Sarll took over in July, sort of the June-July period in 2024. Everyone who you've named since has either been an interim or permanent charge since that date.
And it's been, what now, 4 or 5 weeks since Grayson was sacked?
Yes, he was sacked on the day after the draw at Gainsborough. Obviously, we lost the replay a few days after that, but he was sacked on that weekend, so it'll probably been like the 12th or something. We'll be just over a month, I think, from that day.
I've never known it anything to take that long. It beggars belief to me from the outside looking in.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all in unsure virtually about what may happen. It could be that Nicky Featherstone does get the job because at the end of the day, other than the disaster against Gainsborough, in which, to be fair to him, he only had a day to prepare the players for that event. Since that day, we've won 2 and drawn 2 of our 4 games. We haven't lost any of those. If we win this weekend, no offense, and then if we win, say, our next couple of games, he's still in interim charge. There's no reason why he shouldn't be getting the job full time because he's winning those games. As much as the fan base, I do believe, would like, a more recognised name or a name sort of maybe is progressing through the ranks further down the pyramid, etc. There aren't going to be many out because we've basically employed every manager in Britain at this point. So there aren't too many left for us to go to, unfortunately. So it may well be the case of we do what Gateshead did for the last couple of seasons, not including the last appointment of Carl Magna, who used to be a Pulse player, of course, the captain. But they employed from within Mike Williamson and Rob Elliott, and they were very good choices for the role. And if you employ the right player, if you employ the right person as a manager from inside the club, you never know from that point of view. Just going back to the table as well, a lot of the top 7 at the moment are the teams that you would probably expect to be there in terms of Carlisle, Rochdale, etc. The 2 that probably stick out are the two of the promoted sides in Scunthorpe in 6th, who are, to be fair, I thought they'd be in and around the top half. I thought they'd be, fairly comfortable. I thought Boreham would be comfortable as well, but I don't think anyone would have had them second at this point. If anything is to go by for the rest of the season. When they came up here, it was 0-0. We went down to 10 men after about 15 minutes or something like that. 50 minutes. We had about 40 minutes to play with 10 men, and they never really threatened the goal. Cartwright, again, had a very good game, but there was never like a golden chance that they created. They seemed happy to pass it around. So I'm surprised they're as high as second. But the question that I'm going to ask as a result of all of this is if Wealdstone were able to get into the playoffs, etc., and you had that sort of success, you've said about, the money and you can't really afford to pay certain wages and you're sort of expecting to survive rather than thrive. But if you do get into that position of playoffs and such like that, do you have the confidence that perhaps the new owner will be able to invest or that the fan-owned section may be able to step up to League Two?
Yeah, it'd have to be the former. Just the sums of money that we're talking about clubs in this league. I think Altrincham lost over £1 million last year, and we kind of associate them as like a Northern Wealdstone, 2 clubs that are very similar in terms of history and the way that they run. I think our accounts when they come out next year, we went hybrids. It's gonna be brutal from a fan zone point of view. But I won't digress too much because even though it's common knowledge, Nick Samarka, who if he comes in, he's going to put in 6 figures straight off the bat into the football club. and he's going to do it in 2 phases. So one tranche of that amount of money, and then he's going to repeat it again down the line. But he's one of those. He's very kind of analytical driven. He's looking more around like, what can we do to spruce the club up within its means. He's very much advocating sustainability. So that's his key mantra. He's not going to, as much as we like to get Alex Reid back, just from his spell with us last year, we're not going to be spending super money getting in a striker to do that. It's going to be built sustainably within our means, but ensuring that we do survive in the meantime. But if for every reason should somehow we finish in the top 7, the money of course would be there. And I guess at that point then it's around the Football League. You get extra grant money if you were to somehow go up. There are some conditions around the ownership of the ground at the moment, because we don't own it. It's owned by a local religious institution, and we lease it. And there's some toing and froing regarding getting that lease signed. And I'm not sure if that has any conditions on entry to the Football League, similar to what Gateshead had a year or two back with their athletics track. I think it's been changed since. I think we're okay, but if not, then that would be the blocker that causes it. I mean, that's getting way above our stations here. Pools have got way more of a chance getting into the top 7 than we do.
That is a very bold statement that I think a lot of our fan base may well disagree with you with. But to be fair, the building blocks are there for us, I would say. And to be fair, there's no reason why any team can't. I've always said there is a team every year in every division that sort of rises from nowhere to get into the playoffs. Like, it don't have to be like in the relegation zone or, anything like that. It doesn't have to be a dramatic rise, but you could easily have teams who are sort of floating around 12th, 13th, 14th, who all of a sudden win 6 on the bounce and then they're in the top 7. So even if one of our lot, or say Halifax are just below us, for example, like if we drop down to 13th, 14th, we're never out of it. Another little sort of wrinkle, if you like, about the game against Wealdstone is the kickoff time, which I'm sure that you've noticed being 3 minutes past 3 instead of the regular 3 p.m. That's because of the 3-up campaign that the National League are currently in the midst of pushing towards the EFL for 3 teams to go up and 3 teams to come back down again. And I think it's fair to say I'd be very surprised if you were against this campaign, Robbie, in all fairness. I'd be surprised if there were many people who listen to this or listen to any National League-based podcast who would oppose that either. And certainly, even though Pools may not be looking at finishing those top 3 anytime soon, I don't think anyone will dispute that, certainly this season. It is something that's been coming for a while. It's something that's needed to come in for a while. And I think even if it feels a little bit, window dressing, if you like, to kick off at 3 minutes past 3, it's something that can bring some fresh eyes to the campaign if the league play it right.
Yeah, well, I think, look, the National League have certainly tried their best to state their case and push forward the 3-up campaign. I know Jonathan Brash, the MP for Hartlepool, has raised the issue. I know Jeff Stelling as well has signed up to support the campaign. It does have a sense of inevitability, certainly from our side of the fence, given that Pools have spent most of the last 7 or 8 years in the National League. Look, I don't mind admitting when Pools were first relegated to the National League, I think as a lifelong fan of a Football League club, you almost had a sense that it was some sort of barren wasteland. But actually, it's a fantastic division. Pools found that out the hard way, didn't they? I think that their first season in the National League, they didn't win any of their opening 6 matches. You've only got to look at the success that some of the teams that have come from the National League into the Football League have had. You look at Luton, Wrexham, Stockport, Notts County, Chesterfield being some of the obvious examples. But even the sides that you wouldn't necessarily expect to go and be so immediately successful proved to be really, really competitive. I don't think a side's been promoted from the National League and immediately relegated for decades. And that tells you all you need to know. There really is almost no gap in quality, I think, between the 2 divisions. And more than that, I think in the interest of sporting fairness, it seems to me that introducing a 3rd promotion place is the right thing to do. I mean, you look at York last season, they got 96 points, finished 2nd, and yet didn't get promoted after having to go through the playoffs. They obviously, because they'd finished 2nd, they had a long gap between at the end of their regular season and their playoff semi-final. I think it was more than a couple of weeks, so they probably lost a little bit of momentum, perhaps even a bit of match sharpness. That's perhaps another debate in and of itself in terms of the makeup of the playoffs. they were well beaten by Oldham in the semi-finals, and they missed out. That doesn't really seem massively fair to me that you can have such a successful, almost all-conquering season and still miss out on promotion. And you look at the bottom end of League Two, a number of sides have struggled for many years, and there is almost a mentality and a mindset of we've only got to be the third worst team in the division. Let's just try and survive. I don't think that's particularly healthy for teams at that level, and certainly not for supporters at that level as well. And I think for the general health of the game, I think a lot of people would agree that in England we are really, really fortunate to have perhaps the best football pyramid in the world. One of the reasons why the English Premier League is so successful and so lucrative is because we have such a successful football pyramid. A lot of young players come and cut their teeth in the National League. A lot of players that have gone on to play for top clubs and indeed for their country have started out in the National League. You look at the likes of Dan Burn, Jordan Pickford, Callum Wilson, Jamie Vardy. They've all come through National League football and gone on to play at the highest level. So I think there is clearly a case that there needs to be a third promotion place introduced. Obviously, the challenge that you're going to have is trying to get the teams in the Football League. I know we hear it all the time. It's like getting turkeys to vote for Christmas, to get them to agree with it. But if you look at, in the interest of fairness, sporting integrity, the interest of the competition and the health of the football pyramid, and of course, crucially, football is a game for the fans. Listen to what the fans want. I think it's something like 93% of football fans are in favour of the National League's 3-Up campaign. Then it seems to me that there's only one right decision to make here.
Absolutely. From a personal point of view, I went to Lisbon just over a year ago now, November 2024, and met some very nice people while I was out there, one of which was in the club shop at Sporting Club de Lisbon. And we were chatting about a few different things. He'd been to university in Britain. He knew where Newcastle was, which I was quite surprised by. But one of the things when we were talking football, and I mentioned I was from Hartlepool, support Hartlepool, etc., and mentioned that, on average, we usually get anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000, depending on how well we're doing, basically. And given that we're in the fifth tier of English football, he was absolutely gobsmacked that we got that many fans. Because fans in other countries, they don't get those attendances, that far down the pyramid. They just don't. I went to a second tier it was at the time, but then Wiesbaden got relegated that season, so maybe I was a bit of an unlucky charm in a sense. But I think the attendance there was only about 1,000 or so. I don't think it was 2,000. I think it was just over 1,000 maybe, and that was a second tier side, albeit not a well-performing one. But a second tier side only getting 1,000 in Germany. Whereas in the fifth tier of English football, you've got teams like Southend who are regularly pulling in 6,000-7,000 a game. You've got York who are pulling in 5,000-6,000 a game. It's ridiculous how deep the pyramid does go in terms of fan bases in this country. So to prove the point of how good our pyramid is, it's a massive asset to English football. Anything that can improve the quality of that, the better. And if that goes with 3 up, 3 down, then so be it. It will be interesting if they do manage to bring it in the future as to what they do with the playoffs, because the current set of the playoffs, going from second to seventh, would you then move that to third to eighth? Because eighth going into the playoffs seems very, very low to me. Like, the fact that you could finish eighth and potentially be promoted in a season in any league seems... I mean, I won't call it reward and failure, because 8th out of 24 is still a decent place to finish just in hindsight, but that will mean that a third of the league could potentially go up. It's a little bit low to me.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I actually like the format that the National League playoffs take at the minute. The issue that they have, obviously, as we've already touched on, is that if you do finish second or third, that is ostensibly a significant advantage. And I think if you look at historically the teams that go up, they do tend to come from those top 4 positions. But obviously those teams did have to wait a couple of weeks before they played their semi-finals. In the end, I think both York and Forest Green ended up being beaten. So that's a slight issue. It does having those extra playoff places does keep the interest alive, but I think that is perhaps because of the fact that there's only one automatic promotion place. That's why that decision has been taken. I'm a big fan of the format of the playoffs. When pools went up, they finished fourth. I think you could maybe argue that's almost the best position to finish when you consider all the factors. Pools had a home quarterfinal, so they didn't have to travel, but they were able to continue their momentum, maintain their match sharpness. Of course, that means you have to go and win an away semi-final, something Pools did at Stockport. That's an enormously difficult thing to do. And I think you perhaps could make the argument that when you get to the final, you've played another game, you've got more minutes in the legs. The legs might be a little bit heavier at the end of a long season. I think it's enormously entertaining, but the playoffs always produce high drama, whether you've got four or five teams, four, 5 or 6 teams. It doesn't necessarily impact that to a greater extent. What it does do, obviously, is reduce the number of teams that languish in mid-table in the final weeks of the campaign with next to nothing left to play for. I would think, just as a hunch, that if they were to introduce a second automatic promotion place, that they would reduce the playoffs to 4 teams like they do it in the Football League in line with that format. But nonetheless, while we only have the one automatic place, I am a big advocate for the way that they do the playoffs, although they might want to tweak them slightly just in terms of the scheduling, so that if you finish second or third, you don't have quite such a long wait between matches.
I think that is very much the pitfall of finishing second and third. It may well be the case that you don't have to play an extra game, but it can also be a disadvantage, as we saw last season. And in a way, we saw that when Pools got promoted as well, because Stockport, it was a very difficult game for Pools to go into, but I think Pools probably did benefit from having that extra game in between the end of the regular season and the game at Stockport. So I think there is certainly something to be looked at there. I don't mind the format as it is. I mean, you've already said, I think it's a unique format. In the English pyramid, you see obviously third versus sixth and fourth versus fifth in higher divisions, and that does work to a point, the 2 legs. But I think, like I say, I just think going down to eighth, if we do get 2 automatic promotions, I think eighth is too low. I do think there needs to be a limit somewhere. Like, because if we keep going in the way that we're going, we're going to have a playoffs where like 16th have a chance of getting promoted, and it does get a bit low. But fingers crossed that the campaign comes to fruition at some point, and if the independent regulator has to get involved at some point as well, then maybe that's what will have to happen in terms of getting the EFL on side. In addition to that as well, Halifax was the first game for yourself for a few weeks, given the current situation around the club. I think the last away game that we'd had before that will have been the Gainsborough game in the FA Cup, I'd imagine. So it'll have been something of a little bit of a break for you, as I think you mentioned on X, formerly Twitter, as well. And by the way, just before we move on, how long will it be until we refer to X as X rather than X, formerly known as Twitter, or Twitter, now X? Because it feels like every time I hear the word X, it's always formerly Twitter.
I've dropped it already, Jack. I'm just X now. I can understand why people did it initially, but I think it's it's probably had its day that. So I'm just onto X now.
I was going to say, because every time I mention it, I always seem to feel the obligation to say formerly Twitter or just Twitter, because it just seems like a daft name, doesn't it? But anyway, going back to the original point, yeah, it has been a while, and I'd imagine it probably has affected you, because obviously you do support the club, you have a love for the club, obviously coming through the family and such, and not being able to watch as many games, even outside of the job that you currently have. I mean, I can imagine it probably does take a toll at some point.
It's been devastating, Jack, to be honest with you. I love the club. I have grown up a Hartlepool United fan. As you say, some of my earliest and best memories are going to watch Pools with my dad. And as I've got older, I've formed a lot of friends through Hartlepool United. And I speak to you first and foremost as a fan. And it's been really agonizing, this situation. It's been incredibly difficult. I've always just wanted what's best for the club. It was obviously a fast-moving and ever-changing situation over the summer. It was hugely challenging, I think, for supporters, because they had genuine fears for the future of the club, not just in the short term, but in the medium to long term. Were they even going to have a club to support? It was enormously daunting, and so it's been a really challenging few months. I think it's taken a toll physically and mentally. To be honest, I moved up to Hartlepool for the sole purpose of covering the club. I didn't know anyone really in the area. My family and friends are all down south. I moved sort of 5 or 6 hours drive away from any of them, from my support network, in order to cover the club, because I love the club. I wouldn't have moved for any other team than Hartlepool. And to have the match days, the press conferences, the visits to the training ground taken away has been hugely challenging. There've been a lot of lonely days and nights where I've sat in my flat pondering the situation, not able to go and watch pools, not able to go and get involved. That's been enormously difficult. It's been a really challenging spell. The one thing I would say that's kept me going has been the support of Pool's fans, friends that I know through Hartlepool, the wider football community as well. Because at times it's felt like a hopeless pursuit. In all honesty, it's been difficult to know quite how, if or when things are ever going to change or get better, as far as I'm concerned. But the support that I've had from Pool's fans in particular has been something that has really helped me keep going. Look, we try to be optimistic and look towards light at the end of the tunnel, and we will continue to do that. I think not just myself, but my bosses at the Hartlepool Mail have tried really hard to engage with Raj Singh and the club more generally. Um, and we will continue to try to do so to reach a positive resolution. I personally don't feel that it's in anyone's best interest for this ban to continue. I don't think it reflects well at all on the club. I maintain that I will always try to be balanced in my reporting of pools. If that means that there are some times where it feels as though the club are being criticised, then that's only because it's in the interest of balance, and I will always try and talk the club up as often as I possibly can as well, because I'm a fan. I want the best for the club. I bear no ill will towards anyone at the club. I would love to see Hartlepool United achieve success this season. That would be absolutely fantastic. It's not so long ago that I remember being in the boardroom watching Pools get promoted to the Football League in 2021. Those are some of the happiest memories of my life. Now we might be a long way from that in for all sorts of different reasons, but we would love to get back, from our point of view, to some semblance of normality. I think it's never really a good sign when the local press, whatever the club may feel being banned, I don't think that's ever a sign of a healthy atmosphere and environment. I would think even the top people at the club would admit they've made some mistakes over the last few months. Perhaps they feel as though some criticism is unjustified. But look, we will continue to work towards a positive resolution. We're really keen to maintain a dialogue with not just with Raj Singh, but a number of the other decision makers at the club as well. I'm delighted to see that results have improved, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. It feels as though Hartlepool United, whether that's the owner, whether that's the fans, whether that's the media, it's been so divided in the last few years. And that's been really difficult to see, because the great strength of the team and the town is its unity. It's Hartlepool United for a reason. I think if we can get everyone pulling in the same direction, that gives the club the best chance to succeed on and off the pitch. And that's what we would really like to see.
Absolutely. A united club and a united press should do wonders for any club, not just Hartlepool United. And certainly at this level, I've already spoken about the fact that the pyramid this low down, we don't get this in other countries in the fifth tier of, say, Portugal and Germany and such, where there's such a strong fan base and such a strong local community. Another thing that the gentleman in Lisbon, I think that's the first time Lisbon has ever been confused for Swindon, so I do apologise to whoever is offended by that. I won't say which one, Lisbon. But the gentleman in Lisbon did say that a town the size of Hartlepool in the UK would be considered a decent city in Lisbon because of the size of the town. They don't have too many in the way of, 100,000, 200,000, in terms of a town that would be considered a city in Portugal. So, when you have something of this strength in football, there are things that, clubs should welcome. I'm not saying they should welcome criticism, because at the end of the day, criticism can only come from a place of bad, if you've done something wrong, so you need to fix that. However, it should never be taken as something that can never be given, because it can only improve the club in the long term. The coverage that the club gets is brilliant compared to some others at this level who may not get the same. You'll get teams, for example, in the Greater Manchester area where there are multiple teams all around the same level who will get split coverage as a result, because they are all of the same ilk. Whereas in Hartlepool, we've obviously got the Mail, we've got Hartlepool Life that Roy Kelly does as well. We've got Radio Tees who provide that coverage for us, which we don't really see with BBC stations around the country because of what I've just mentioned in terms of, the split coverage. They feel like they won't want to prioritise one League Two team over another, for example. But we've got that coverage with Radio Tees. And I just think at the end of the day, if this doesn't resolve itself in due course, it can only get worse from a PR point of view. So, obviously, it's up to the people involved to sort this out. And at the end of the day, if a resolution can be reached, the only people it's going to hurt are the fans, and in particular, fans who aren't match going either. Through no fault of their own, it must be said, because a lot of people do work on Saturdays, and those people will be affected the most by the fact there's no commentary at home games from Radio Tees at the moment, by the fact that people aren't allowed to ask questions, as yourself and Rob aren't at the moment. And it's a risk because it will drive people away in the end.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for the kind words and the support, Jack. And look, I wouldn't be doing my job as a journalist if I didn't criticize where appropriate. If I'm also going to be praising where appropriate, you have to try and provide a balanced perspective. That's something we will always try to do. We try to hold people to account without being unduly negative. And as you say, I think the longer this goes on, the worse it potentially gets. We'd love to be back in Victoria Park reporting on positivity and wins. That's really what we want to do, especially as I say, as I speak to you as a Pools fan. That's our goal. When I first moved up to Hartlepool, my dream was to be able to cover a season where Pools won promotion. We want to be positive. We want to be optimistic. And look, we still harbor hopes that may happen. As I say, we're working as hard as we possibly can to try and maintain some constructive dialogue and hopefully reach a positive resolution in due course.
Well, they say that you all have to dream big, and I think covering a promotion season of Pools is certainly dreaming big, considering our history. I think, what is it, 3 promotions, 4 promotions? I think one in the 60s, one in the 90s. Obviously, there was 2. Oh no, there's 2 in the 2000s, and then there's 2021. So maybe it's 5, perhaps. But either way, they are very few and far between. So we can all dream about that. I mean, to be fair, it's interesting actually. Just before we go, because I have thought of that point. With myself and Danny made this point earlier on, in that our cup record since we've been relegated is horrific. It is awful because we went through it, and you look at the season that we came down, we lost to Chester in the FA Cup. That was the first time we'd ever lost in the qualifying round. I think we beat the City of Liverpool after we conceded inside 3 minutes, but we beat them and then got beat by Hampton and Richmond in the trophy the next round. And then since that time, we've went out of both cup competitions in the first round that we've been able to play. Got beat by Brackley, obviously, after the replay, which ended Darren Sarll's tenure. And then we had Tamworth at home. That was, I think, the worst penalties I've ever seen Pools take, and that's saying something because we missed all 3. And then this season, of course, we've went out to Gainsborough, and it remains to be seen who we draw in the trophy this time around. The second round of the FA Trophy is this weekend, so we'll learn sooner rather than later, because that is the final round before we enter. So is there something there you think maybe is of a mentality thing that the cups don't really matter for the players? Because these aren't exactly teams either that you would feel that we'd be struggling against. If we drew, for example, York or Rochdale in the round of the trophy coming up, you'd think, well, that's a very difficult draw. So if we put in an effort and, come out with an narrow loss, we've at least had a go against a team who was superior. But we are drawing teams who you would expect us to beat in the likes of Hampton and Richmond and Gainsborough and Chester. We are seeming to be falling short against teams in lower leagues than us in the cups.
Well, the cups only don't matter if you go out of them at an early stage. I think, Jack, you look at someone like Spennymoor relatively on Hartlepool United's doorstep, and how much that run to the final of the FA Trophy meant to them as a team, as a club, and the area as well. The players and the staff, obviously Graham Lee doing a really good job in charge. Their Pools fans would love something like that. You don't have to think too far back to when they reached the semi-finals of the Football League Trophy, were within a penalty shootout of reaching Wembley as well. But and of course the FA Cup 4th round tie against Crystal Palace, which was perhaps even more memorable, a fantastic day for the club and the town, and a real chance to showcase what Hartlepool United has to offer as well. I think it can be a fantastic opportunity. I think the fact that they have struggled in cup competitions in recent years is certainly a mentality thing. I've said before, I don't think Pools have necessarily got that killer instinct, that winner's mentality, but I think it's also probably a sign of the general malaise that has tended to dominate in the last few years as well. There have been a lot of struggles. The cup games often feel to me more like an inconvenience than an opportunity, and I think that's something that needs to be changed. And that obviously is very much a mentality thing, because they can be a real chance not only to bring a bit of pride and momentum, but of course, and particularly the FA Cup, but to a lesser extent the FA Trophy, if you can reach the final stages, they can be quite lucrative as well, and that's massively important for teams at our level. So it would be great to see Pools have a run. Perhaps it may be the trophy this year, but certainly you'd like to see them have a proper crack at the FA Cup one of these years as well.
Yeah, and I did ask the question to Danny yesterday, and I think I would take the deal as well. In terms of the FA Trophy, it's the only competition that we're currently in. If we were guaranteed a trip to Wembley in the final of the FA Trophy, would you sacrifice a playoff place this season?
That's a great question, Jack.
And I'm not talking about getting relegated or anything like that, because clearly that's not acceptable. But if we were to finish, say, 10th or 11th in the league, but you were guaranteed to go to Wembley in the FA Trophy final, would you take that deal? Because I think I said I would, because I'd love to see Pools at Wembley.
Look, I think like a lot of people, I'd love to see Pools at Wembley. I think, having just said what I've just said, I don't want to contradict myself, but I think the league has to be the priority. Perhaps if you offered me it at this stage in the season, when the playoffs, perhaps that seventh spot still looks attainable. And look, if Pools can string a run of wins together, it's not impossible that they could upset the picture a little bit higher up the division as well. So perhaps you might take it now. I think if you'd offered me that at the start of the season, I think probably not. I think the playoffs, the National League has to be the priority. There's only so long we can sit here and say, oh, Hartlepool United's a Football League club, it belongs in the Football League, before that doesn't become a reality anymore. I think that getting back into the Football League and staying there has to be the number one priority. But look, we'd all love a run in the FA Trophy nonetheless.